So Noah, interestingly, you and I, before this all happened, two words were dominating the marketing landscape. One was innovation. The other one was disruption. And now there's another word that's dominating our landscape. It's reset. So when we think about it, how do we reset in this environment those two critical words, pre-pandemic? How do we reset on innovation? How do we reset on disruption? How has the environment changed?
So disruption and innovation have been happening in the television industry for the better part of the past decade, at least from my perspective. And that has certainly accelerated in a significant way, at least over the past 5 years. So the disruption and innovation are not necessarily new. I think that the pace with which the industry is being disrupted and now willing to disrupt itself is exponentially increasing. And that's a very new thing. And it's causing us to use the word reset because that is what we need to do as an industry. And it has to do with the fact that forward-looking perceptions, forecasts that are coming out from insights teams at agencies, research organizations, they're predicting a decline in traditional linear advertising budgets. And the fact is, television is and remains the most effective medium for delivering a message to an audience. And so this is an opportunity to look at ourselves and to say the way that we've always done this or that actually doesn't have to continue. We can take this moment because we've all figured out we can work remotely and still run our businesses and conduct our lives and with some level of significant efficacy. And so we can think about things differently. And in terms of the reset, what we think it is, what I think it is it's about empowering TV to do more. It is about empowering TV to compete more effectively with digital. It is about allowing television to not only provide effectiveness, but also to provide efficiency and new capabilities through data and technology to both the selling community and the buying community.
So reset really is about folding the map in terms of taking advantage of this inflection point in time, doing what it's always done well, but getting more efficient from what I hear you say. There's another term that's thrown a lot, and since the term of the quote unquote new normal. And we take a combination of an idea like a reset and we want to get ourselves to a new normal. I'm going to ask you a couple of different things. One is there a practice that you'd like to through in a new normal after a reset? Is there a practice that we should just leave behind forever with respect to the multi-screen TV business? And also, is there a practice that you think has finally got its day, time to really grab it and run? So something we should all just leave behind, and then something that, boy, its time has come. What do you think?
Absolutely. And the thing that we as an industry need to leave behind, it isn't really specific to television, but it's specific to digital. And we believe that we need to leave behind last click attribution. Last click attribution has done a major disservice to marketers, agencies, media sellers, basically everyone except for Google and Facebook. And it is time that we leave that behind and we look to the future to doing something new. And I have a feeling you're going to ask me, what is that thing that we should start doing?
You are precisely right.
So the good news is I have an answer, and it's also attribution related. It's not that attribution is the panacea to what television needs to go through, but it is certainly a moment right now where we need to prove that television can do more, and the efficacy of television is greater than display. It's greater than search, and so forth. And the way that we do that, it's not a race to the bottom of the funnel with transactional based attribution. It's actually using something that 605, where I work, has been doing this for many years, and it's something we call full funnel attribution. What full funnel attribution is it's looking at KPIs or metrics for an ad campaign that is airing or has aired, that looks at brand lift at the top, as well as either a mid-funnel activity, whether that's website visitation or foot traffic through geolocation, or combined with transactional information, who has purchased what, etc. It can really be any combination of the different phases that a consumer goes through in the funnel. But at a minimum, it must include a brand lift component as well as a mid-funnel type activity. And what this allows television to do is it allows television to prove that it can do the same thing that search or display or digital has been doing for more than a decade, but it also proves that the branding component is a critical component that still has some magic associated with it, but now it's actually quantifiable. And that's the thing that we believe that really must be embraced.
And I think that's probably what we hear from marketers. That's the sort of division in thinking that's, getting a lot of destruction to it these days. This idea that there is, these very separate roles. There's a role for, video media and digital media that can activate and, turn something into a customer, turn a lead into a customer and, just conquest. And then there's long-term brand building. And I think what we're beginning to open up the industry's eyes to with sophisticated data, very sophisticated data, is that you can actually do them simultaneously, sometimes within the same 30-second ad, certainly within the same campaign. I'm going to use a word, though, in order to get to that level that you're talking about, what 605 can do in attribution. We're talking about pretty sophisticated data. So now we've got to bring in, the four-letter word. And, every marketer has used data for over a decade as being the thing to pay the most attention to and the magic carpet ride for how it's all going to work. In an evolved 2020 way, when we look at that four-letter word data, and you think about 605's capabilities, what's the most evolved use of the kind of data that allows for the insights and the ability to really hone your marketing instruments? What's the most evolved sense of data these days?
So before I can answer that question, Sean, I think it's important to describe that there are two specific primary categories of data as it pertains to the television universe. There's data that describes viewership, whether that's viewership of ads or viewership of content. And then there's data that can be associated with the audience that is viewing that content or being exposed to those ads. And those are two very different types of data. 605 is exclusively focused on the viewership and exposure side of the data equation. And there's a very wide spectrum of television viewership data that is available in the industry. And there's a lot of catchphrases thrown around. And there's a lot of jargon associated with this. And from our perspective, we see that there are three specific areas that you need to think about when it comes to viewership data. And that the first one is, what is the scale of the viewership data set that you're looking at? Is it a 100,000 something person panel? Is it a census-based view of the television universe that's 40 million households, and it has some amount of projection methodology to represent the national market or local markets? Or is it something in between? In the case of 605, we offer 21 million households of television viewership information. And we project that out for the US national population. But so the scale is a really important thing. And the scale allows you to do and perform certain types of activities around planning, around insights, around activation, measurement, and of course, attribution. The larger the viewership data set you have, the more capability you have to do full funnel attribution, for example, like we were talking about before. And because from a methodological perspective, if you're doing brand lift surveys, you're probably going to want to survey 50,000 people that have been exposed to an ad. That's going to require a very, very large viewership data set. So that's the first component. The second component is that you have panel-based data, you have set-top box-based data, and you have ACR data. And then, of course, you have digital television viewership data as well. So those are 4 different types of viewership data. And to be honest, they have different qualities. They each have different pros and cons. And when you use one exclusive type of data, you're actually not able to see the full picture. You're not able to see the full story. And so at 605, we really, really believe that it's essential to combine at least 2 different types of data. And so what we do is we combine set-top box data with ACR data. So we get a sense of whole home viewership from a set-top box perspective, as well as the ultimate arbiter of what is playing back on the screen, and a little bit of a glimpse into connected TV viewership from the ACR side of things. And the third and last thing is that it's not just about taking data and the size of that data, but it's about the science and the methodology around processing the data and projecting for a national population, projecting for local markets, and doing that in a way that is of a exceptional quality. That is probably the biggest variable that exists out there in the marketplace in terms of what can be licensed. And so for 4-letter word data, from a viewership perspective, these are the 3 things that I think it's important for the industry to think about. There's one other component, and that is how can you interface with that data? And different data sets have different capabilities. And that has to do with matching rights, and do you have to do lookalike modeling, and so forth. But we can talk about that one later.
Yeah. Well, let's dolly back a little bit. And I thought that was an excellent, description and an excellent way to sort out what's a pretty complicated, evolving marketplace. But, clearly, a handle on state-of-the-art multi-screen TV data. If we're talking to a marketer and we pull back a little bit further and they're used to, say they're working with a 605 and they're working with a sophisticated data set that's, got the capabilities that you just described. And like a lot of marketers, they've got partnerships with Google, they've got partnerships with Facebook, and they're used to hearing from those organizations that their data is state of the art. How can you, for a marketer in marketer terms, kind of let them know among that sort of big dolly back landscape for a marketer who uses a Google, a Facebook, and uses, your type of data. How are they different? How do you sort it out for a marketer in terms they can understand about those three sort of data sets, and what a couple of the advantages might be with respect to the granularity of your type of data? Is there an easy way to do that?
The great news is this is the problem that 605 is laser focused on solving. We're essentially focused on reinventing traditional television measurement so that we can provide the ultimate lens of linear, DVR, and set-top box VOD viewership, regardless of when someone happens to be viewing. So basically time shifting into infinity, not restricted to 28 days or 35 days, et cetera. And processing that information so that it can be analyzed in a privacy compliant manner, in a equivalent fashion to the way that a Google or Facebook allows marketers to work with their advertising data. If you think about what digital has been doing all along, is digital has been providing deterministic capabilities to understand the exact number of exposures and clicks for advertisements. And over time, they've built out some amount of capability to describe the audience and to provide some semblance of reach so that they can the marketers can understand how much of the universe they're potentially reaching. This is something that television has been doing for decades from a reach perspective. But what we've had to do is we've had to reset, and we've had to say, in order to allow television to be able to not only say, here's the unduplicated reach by selling title, by network, by individual ad spot, and provide reach and frequency curves, to not only be able to do that, but to also provide those clicks, if you will, a television equivalent to that. Or take it a step further, brand lift in a meaningful way that isn't just surveying 2,000 individuals. And combining that with transactional data, that requires a wholesale reinvention. And so what we've done with 605 is we created a product called 605 Platform, and that's built on our 21 million households. And what's interesting about our viewership data set is that we process everything down to an anonymous household level. This gives us a huge amount of flexibility to allow for our new 605 lens of TV to be able to answer the same types of questions that people can answer with Google or Facebook. And specifically for a marketer, obviously they could use Platform to be able to do planning and insights, but there's the attribution component, and we recently announced that we launched a product called 605 Impact. That's a self-service, always-on attribution solution that allows for data about the audiences to be deterministically matched to television viewership in a privacy-compliant manner. And this is the key to allowing television to do the same thing that Google and Facebook have been offering all along.
Got it. So from a perspective, we're really talking about a best of both worlds, hybrid, and going forward, that's a great piece of news. I've got to ask you, you brought up unduplicated reach. You brought up a lot of things that are on the, on the wish list of marketers and agencies. And that's, with respect to when we look at multi-platform measurement and unduplicated reach from the capabilities you've been describing, it sounds like, like we might be there yet. Are we there yet with respect to a business that's been thirsting for, the ability to really do true cross-platform measurement? I mean, it is what everyone wants, and everyone wants to understand that unduplicated reach number. Are we there yet? How close are we?
Unfortunately, I don't believe that we as an industry have solved the cross-platform unduplicated reach problem yet. Anyone that has said that they have solved it, that type of solution is most likely anecdotal at best. In order to solve for cross-platform unduplicated reach, first of all, you can't just say, here's the incremental reach over linear. You have to have a complete and granular understanding of what is traditional linear viewership, what is traditional DVR viewership, what is set-top box VOD viewership, what's the unduplicated reach across all three of those traditional mediums. There is no one, except for 605, that has the capability to provide a scalable unduplicated reach solution across those three traditional types of television delivery. So that's the starting point. Then the second point is combining that with digital viewership. And what we need to do as an industry is we have to be able to process that digital ad exposure data or that digital viewership data. It has to be normalized. And then identity has to be associated with the digital exposures. And that's a huge problem in and of itself. There's device graph companies out there and solutions. Block Graph recently was announced by Charter, Comcast, and Viacom, which is a potential solution. There's safe havens that play a role in that, but even the identity issue of associating identity with digital exposure, that hasn't been fully solved, unless you're a walled garden. But the walled gardens do not let that type of information outside of their walls. So in order to solve this, we have to work towards, at first, something that's good enough. And in my mind, the good enough is good enough association of identity on the digital side of things, obviously in a privacy compliant manner, and then being able to deterministically match that up to a large census style multi-source television viewership data set without lookalike modeling. So you have a very large cross-platform panel, say of 21 million households. And then we apply projection models on top of that so that it can represent, it can fit within and represent the national population. And so that we don't leave digital impressions on the table wasted, et cetera. And this is something that 605 is working with a number of programmers and agencies on right now. It's no small feat. And it requires a wholesale rethinking of traditional measurement in order to provide this level of next generation cross-platform measurement.
Got it. So from so many perspectives, we've come light years, and 605 has been a huge piece of that, but still a ways to go with respect to things that need to be worked out. So understood. No, as a final question, I've got to come back, and I want to make sure that we get this right, because I think this is so critical to the understanding. And thank you for having done just, I think, a fabulous job of clarifying and being able to sort things and making them accessible. But you forgive me, I got to double back on one word and make sure that I get it right and everybody who's watching gets it right. And talk to me about this term, deterministic data, and that seems so critical, and I want to make sure that we leave with the clearest definition we can of that term.
Absolutely, Sean. Deterministic in its simplest form means taking one data set and matching it to another data set on a one-to-one basis without any lookalike modeling whatsoever. So it is a high fidelity match in the case of our conversation, television viewership data or ad exposure data matched on a one-to-one basis to brand lift surveys, to foot traffic data, to website visitation data, to actual transactional data. That match can be performed at a household level. It could be performed at a device level. It must be performed in a privacy compliant manner. And that is a non-negotiable component. But the core of it is overlaying data in a high fidelity manner onto the television universe. You can then take it one step further. Sorry to continue.
This is great.
You could take it one step further, and once you've done that high fidelity match, without lookalike modeling at a zip code level to roll it out to the rest of your viewership footprint, for example, once you do that high fidelity match, you then can apply a sophisticated projection model and scientific methods to have it represent the US television watching population, or for individual local metro areas, for example. But it's important that you do that match before you do the projection. So hopefully that sheds some clarity.
I think that was perfect. I mean, I'd been carrying around in my head, I kind of thought of it as no compromises data. But
Yeah.
the idea, I would extend it now that I understand what you're saying, and it'd be no compromises, high fidelity data. And I think that's a great simplistic understanding. I mean, these are really important concepts. There's been so much progress made in your field by 605, and I think you've done such a good job of trying to make them, accessible for all of us. And I really appreciate that. Can't wait till we're actually in the same room again. That'd be great. But in the meantime, it's been great that you took some time, walked us through, the state of what advanced play is, and made it simple for us. And no, I got to thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Sean. This has been a pleasure.